Hello and welcome to A Woman's Heart. I'm looking forward to sharing this conversation as we are in our summer reading series. And welcome to the show, Callie Murray.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yes. Well, I tell people a little bit of my guilty pleasure because I get to just have lots of fun and read lots of fun books to relax and lose myself in stories. But there's always so many fun lessons and themes and such to learn because I do think we can really learn a lot in fiction stories. But before we get into your book, I would love to get to know you, let my audience get to know you. So tell us a little bit about yourself and something fun that isn't normally in your bio.
Okay, I love it. Yeah, my name's Callie Murray. I live in Norcross, Georgia, which is a little town just north of Atlanta, with my husband, and then we have 7 children,
Wow.
which is a little bit of a newer development. We had a group of 4 kiddos join our family last summer, and
Wow.
yeah, so
Yes.
we actually in one week, next Friday, we finalize the adoption. We get to go to court and finalize it, which is great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And then, yeah, I would say we live in a little old house. It was built in 1870
Oh,
and
wow.
has, been patchwork added onto over the years. And we bought it from a couple whose last name was Norcross, which I love. So of the Norcrosses in our town.
Yes. Well, that is fun. And I do know about houses when they get added on and patchworked here and patchworked there. It can be very fun and very interesting at times.
I know. We did a quick little renovation this year when we added these kiddos because all of a sudden we had 2 kids in a closet in our bedroom. I mean, it was just chaos. So now it feels like a mansion, but we have it'll add to the list of additions to this little house.
Yes, yes, it will. And I'm sure it was a very welcome addition to the house and to the family, because that is something near and dear to your heart as far as adoption. And before we get going into that a little bit more, what are you hoping that people will get from our conversation today?
Yeah, I love that question. I would say, so this book I wrote is historical fiction, but I would love for people to take their modern day real life, a look at their modern real life and just kind of think about their own community and kind of I hope they can kind of either be encouraged in how they can steward their community or maybe inspired to maybe grow their community and deepen some relationships. That's what I
Yeah.
hope.
Well, and there were so many wonderful themes about community and how they banded together, but also some of the dark sides of a small community. You can have a couple of individuals that can throw some kinks in there. But you wrote the book called The Brunswick, and there's actually a place in Norcross that is called the Brunswick. So tell, without giving anything away, we don't want any spoilers because we want people to read the book. Give us a little brief synopsis of the book, and I love the background behind why you wrote it. Give us some of that.
Okay, sure. So the Brunswick is about a woman, Cora Kane, who lives in Norcross, Georgia. And it's 1939, so this is before World War II has started, but things are brewing
Yeah.
overseas. And she runs a general store inside this old hotel her dad built called the Brunswick. And so we've got a little bit of a love story with Cora and this guy that comes to town, but ultimately kind of the big premise of the book is Cora is asked to use the hotel to house Jewish refugee children from Austria as things are kind of escalating overseas. And so it's yes, it's the story of what that means to Cora, what that means to the town, what that means to these kids, to the parents that make the choice to send them overseas. And in a lot of ways, it is a foster care story, just without, the system as we know it today.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I really do love how you developed the characters and how they went through and what and just how they were feeling. And I've told you too, there were a couple of twists in there I was not expecting, and I was really glad that I was going to have the chance to tell you that I was very unhappy about some of those little twists. But yeah, or very concerned, shall I say. I was very concerned in the moment about some of these twists, but we'll just let people hang with that one and be curious about reading the book. And as I mentioned, you talked about the community, and there were so many things about the beauty of community and how some people came in and were helping. And one of the things that you brought out at the end was just how much we don't necessarily, when you're talking about foster care and adoption, we don't necessarily have to be the ones doing the adoption or the foster care, but we can still help. And I would love for you to dive a little bit more into that and how that plays into this and as you mentioned, in real life.
Yeah, okay, this is a crazy stat for you. There are almost 400,000 children in the US foster care system.
Oh, wow.
There are also around 400,000 churches in the US. And so if every church had one foster child in their congregation, just one,
Mm,
then every child in America has a loving home that in theory that they can call theirs. And so that doesn't mean every single person has to be a foster parent
yeah.
or um, and so I don't know, I just think about that. What if one family felt this call towards foster care, and then what if that church body surrounded them?
Mm,
Um, Another stat that's crazy is only 50% of families continue with foster care after the first year. But if
mm,
there is a care
wow.
community around them, like, people bringing meals or helping with childcare, 90% will continue beyond that first year. So I just think
Wow.
there is I mean, we've experienced it personally, such an intense value in having people walk alongside you, whether that's super practically or just the very emotional, spiritual, how can I pray for you? Or I was praying for you today and I heard this or something like that.
Yeah. Now, and that just kind of blows my mind because I've heard wonderful stories of adoption and foster care, and I've also heard some, shall we say, very challenging stories about foster care and adoption. And how much of that you think is just people being afraid of the bad stories they've heard, the challenging stories that they've heard? How much of that just holds people back? And then with the good, how do you overcome that fear to then look for the beauty in that moment?
Yeah. Well, one thing I would always say is I would not want anyone to step into foster care out of guilt or pride or any, like
That doesn't
and
work
so
well.
yes. So don't hear me sharing those stats and be like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And so I'd also say like, if you're a praying person, like turn your ear towards this and say, okay, open hands, what is my role here?
Mm,
And and I think it might be that you are called into stepping into that foster care role, or maybe you're
mhm,
called into yeah, bringing a meal or getting to know a kid, or I mean, I feel like I do not believe that we are all called to foster ever, or even right now, but I do think we are called to serve the vulnerable, and I think
yeah.
these, this is a vulnerable population.
Mhm,
Um, yeah, these are kids coming from some amount of trauma, neglect, varying levels for sure. And so it's messy and hard and dark. And those stories are real. And
yeah.
I mean, that there's also unbelievable stories of redemption, but
Mhm.
um, yeah, that is a reality for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I love how you talked about the open hands. And there are a couple of times in the book where Cora is a little overwhelmed. And I could very much relate to when she was just trying to do everything and trying to do it all herself. It was kind of hard to ask for help and really open up and let what, ask for help or even receive. And so there is a thing where she's really kind of told to, I guess, sail with the wind or go with the wind. And
Yeah,
then she talked about
trust
the
me.
open hands and that idea of we are in such a culture where we are told to be independent and to hustle and hurry and do more and do more and do more. And it can be exhausting. We are also experiencing a lot of burnout. And I love that theme of there are times when striving is not what's beneficial. We really do have to go in with open hands and be willing to receive more than we're willing to strive and go out to that. Was that something you were exploring on purpose, or did it just kind of come out in the character because you don't relate at all with having seven
Yeah.
children?
That was a very true to life story that happened to me. So, yeah, years ago, I was an entrepreneur. We had had our third baby. My husband was military. It was just like max striving, keeping everything alive. And I, I mean, I was so overwhelmed. And I had a friend reach out and say, I've been praying for you. And I just have this picture of you on a sailboat in a lake. And you were paddling it and you were going nowhere and you were so exhausted. And I feel like God said, sailboats are not meant to be paddled. You should wait for the wind. And it was just this most beautiful picture of saying, you're right. Like I can feel when I am paddling a sailboat, you know? And then
Mhm.
there's other times where you can kind of you surrender and you say, I mean, we actually were given a crazy marriage trip on this giant sailboat not long after.
Oh,
And so
wow.
we are on this like 100-person sailboat. There's a crew, and we're watching these crew members chart the course, raise the sails. Like they're not just giving up and being like wherever the
Yeah.
wind takes
Yeah,
us.
wherever the wind. Yeah, it's not like there's no
Yeah,
plan or no direction or
yeah, or
guidance
no
at all.
activity of some kind. But ultimately, it was the wind that directs it. And so for me, that's been just such a huge picture for me of when am I paddling and when am I raising the sails and ultimately waiting for the wind to direct it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it is. I think it is a beautiful picture of the sailboat and how it's really powered by the wind and all, metaphorically, the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
But he does, we do have the control about, a little bit of the rudder and we still have our part to play. But then letting the Holy Spirit power that, and that it's a lot easier than trying to paddle. Yeah, I've seen some big, beautiful sailboats, and yeah, the idea of paddling them is just completely ludicrous.
Right. Ridiculous. Yep.
It's just, yeah, it's just kind of crazy. And then we mentioned that there were some dark themes because your book is set during that time where the World War II was just kind of starting to stir. It covers some of the prejudices. And I mentioned to you, my grandfather was of German descent. And
Mhm.
he was growing up in Pennsylvania, and his grandparents had come over from Germany, and they did experience some of that, which I had not seen in a book before. So I kind of appreciated it. And then years later, my grandfather fought in World War II, only he fought in the Pacific Rim against the Japanese in the Pacific area. And then my brother went to Japan, fell in love, and he married a Japanese woman. So I'm sure there was a little bit of that with my grandfather going around on that. And some of these prejudices, fortunately, it worked out. We love her. She's accepted. I love my nieces and all of that. My grandfather didn't experience anything too terrible, but there was that tension involved. And how did you want to handle? I think you did a very good job handling it. Whereas sometimes that fear and that suspicion really kind of comes out. And I think one of the quotes that I actually wrote down was people will always fear what they don't know.
Yeah.
And talk to us a little bit more about that. I guess being curious, getting to know, and not just going straight to prejudice and fear and the mass hysteria and going, I guess, with what the media does nowadays or something.
Yeah. I would credit a lot of this to my in-laws. Uh, Bill and Kitty Murray, they started a coffee shop here in Atlanta called Refuge Coffee Company. And they hire refugees and do job training and, English classes and all of that through this coffee shop. And the way it started was my mother-in-law, Kitty, kind of in her retirement, like she's going to go, chill out. And she ends up starting this whole thing. But
So
she's
what are
got
you
to know a
retiring
couple.
to is what I say. What are you
Yes.
retiring to? You may quit a former job, but then what are you still going to do to have purpose?
Yes. But she got to know a neighbor from Somalia who had been through just unspeakable tragedy. I mean, lost her husband and all of her children in the most horrible way.
Oh,
And, but this woman had said, like, as refugees, so often, I mean, the stats are crazy on how many have never set foot in an American living room. And there's just kind of this idea of, I don't know, or even just some of the awkwardness of language barriers.
yeah.
even from an American side where it's like, this is awkward. Are they going to feel weird? Um, and so, yeah, Kitty and Bill kind of got this idea to start a coffee shop as kind of this extension of an American living room, right? So, I mean, for years, we've just had folks from incredibly different backgrounds and languages and cultures at family Thanksgiving or just, um, and it's been cool because that's just been what my kids have been raised into is,
Mm,
and
mhm.
man, it's like when you get to know a person,
Yeah.
um, and not just this, yeah, a headline or
Or
um,
government.
a government,
Yeah.
exactly. Or it is a completely different
Yeah.
situation. It's a story. You get to know the story. So anyway, I think that definitely came into the book in some capacity of,
Hmm.
yeah, just there's nuance there. Yeah,
Yeah.
um, everybody's got a story. And I think once you know that, that changes things.
Yeah, I like the point that you make in getting to know the individual and not just the headline or the group that they supposedly are a part of, and the richness that adds to your family and the perspective that it gives your children growing up, I think is amazing because my husband and I actually hosted several exchange students from several different countries around the world. So my children have grown up. Well, they spoke English, but they also spoke another language. But the idea of other languages and other cultures and all of that, and not being so quick to judge somebody simply based on a large stereotype of a group and getting to know them. And how do you think it has affected your family getting to know all of these people from all corners of the world?
Yeah. Oh man, I'm so proud of my kids. I feel like I mean, even when we added this group of four new, when our family doubled last summer, uh, I was so proud of our girls I mean, they were so excited. We asked them, what do you think? And they were like, of course, yes, come on. Um, and I think some of the fears we may have as grown-ups of, is the language barrier weird? Or
Hmm.
like, kids just don't have that quite the same.
No, they don't.
And it's so fun to watch. Like yeah, they just don't have those insecurities that we carry.
Yeah, that we've grown to adopt.
Yeah.
That we didn't necessarily start out with, but life has taught us different ways. And in bringing these kids, bringing around, one of the other themes that I noticed was the idea of home
Hmm.
and what is home, where is home, and was that another intentional thing, or did it just kind of come out? Because I would love for you to talk a little bit more about when you talked about this idea of home and what home should be.
Yeah, what's wild is I started writing this book before I knew we would ever adopt. I think it had been this kind of tug in our hearts in some capacity, but I mean, I wrote that entire book without knowing our four other children existed. And we last summer these kiddos moved in, and actually the day that my final manuscript was approved was the day our family doubled. And
Wow.
so I think what's wild to me is the things about a home and it being a soft place to land. I actually don't credit that to anything that I've like learned, or it's no wisdom I'm sharing. I truly feel like God was preparing me for our own family.
Mm,
And so I mean, I cry every time I read that line towards the end of, yeah, it's home is talks about it being a soft place to land and
yeah.
where you're free and your roots can grow deep and all of this. But yeah, I think for me, it was just God preparing me for, I mean, yeah, we've got these kiddos now who they they've had a kind of unsettled past,
Mhm.
and as
Yeah.
of next Friday, they have a way more settled future. And so I think there's honoring their past and the home that they've come from, but also kind of giving them this
Hmm.
steady breathing room in the future.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and because you mentioned these children do have a past, but we all carry things. And one of the other things that they're carrying, several of these characters are carrying different forms of grief,
Mhm.
whether that be in the form of a lost loved one or a lost dream, or then certainly with the children that are coming over from, they've have experienced a lot of loss. And it's interesting how you have different characters deal with it differently.
Mhm.
And how have you seen grief either pull somebody out to something different, say into a new purpose, or and others don't handle it very well? They just kind of implode, shall we say.
I love your questions. These are great. Um, yeah, we lost my father-in-law. So Bill Murray, who I mentioned, he passed away a couple years ago, and it was so interesting to watch. We all lost the same man,
Yeah.
but all of our loss and grief was so different. I lost my father-in-law, my husband lost his dad, Kitty lost her husband, and I just thought that was such an interesting thing. Yeah, we've lost the same person, but our grief is so different. And then there's how do we handle the grief? And I heard on a recent, I think it was John Mark Comer, maybe, he talked about hurt can either be transmitted or transformed. And so I think a lot of times it's, yeah, grief, hurt, whatever it means, like sometimes it can be this outward anger or drinking or, whatever it might be. And
Hmm.
sometimes it can be something that gets yeah, transformed into, I think a lot for us, it's like, how can we honor this legacy that Chief has given us as a way to kind of handle some of our own grief?
Hmm. Yeah, well, in the book you call it refer to it as melancholy. That is what they refer to. We would call it depression
Depression. Yeah.
now, but they refer to it as melancholy. And the I guess lack of understanding or the lack of resources and how it then affected the other people around them and not always knowing how to best help the other person. And in some cases, some people just really didn't want to be helped for a while. And there's also that, which is very difficult. But I love how you kept it very real. There were a couple of times that I kind of went, well, I would have liked to have seen this maybe differently, but I'm the reader. I don't get to make those choices. You're the writer. You get to do them at all. But I really did love how you saw the progression of people and through their grief. And as you mentioned, we handle it so differently. It can be the same person, but it's not necessarily always a person. It can be a dream that we have, and just how important it is for us to go through that in a healthy way, um,
Mhm.
and transform that. So, well, along your journey in writing this book, was there anything, were you expecting to learn a particular lesson or, learn something that then it wasn't that, it was something completely different that God surprised you with while you were writing this book?
Yeah, goodness. Okay, so I feel like it's like a counseling session. I'm just giving you all my dirty stuff. So, um, so Cora's father, he's the one who he had fought in the Great War, and he's got the melancholy. He's got
Mhm.
this depression, and I think a lot of Cora's relationship with her father is something that I've been working through with my own dad,
Mhm.
and um, and so it's funny. In one of my early drafts, I have. I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler. We'll see. I won't get, but
Well,
um,
I do tell people highlight, delete. This is pre-recorded. Highlight, delete is a
okay,
beautiful thing.
okay, great. We'll see. But in an early draft, I had Cora. Basically there was a super happy ending. Everything wrapped up beautifully tidy. And it was just so happy and great. And I actually had an agent really early on who didn't know any of that connection between me and my dad, but she was like, this just doesn't feel like real life. Like this all just felt a little too happy. And I shared that with my best friend who had read the draft, and she's like, honestly, Callie, like, it's true. Like, you are trying to take your own story and wrap it up in this really happy bow. I think you need to go sit in the hard a little longer. And
Ooh,
I was like, oh no. Yeah,
there's a
exactly.
friend for you.
Exactly. And so there was a day where, I told my husband and kids, like, I have to go rewrite this chapter, and it's going to be hard. And it was because it was like, oh, I need to sit in this longer. And like anger comes out and disappointment. Um, but I also want there to be hope in it. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I think writing through that relationship was one where I felt like God was talking to me about myself.
Yeah. Oh, don't you love it when he does that?
I know.
You're like, isn't there an easier way to process this, Lord?
Yeah. And then now let me let everybody read it.
Yes, and now we can all read and go, oh wow. Well, it's interesting that your friend was like, yeah, they're right. You have to do that. That is a good friend. And I do love the relationship between Cora and her friend Billy because they at times seem so incredibly different, and yet they are both there for one another and they will call each other out. And I think that really is a sign of a true friendship is to be able to love somebody, but then be able to go, yeah, you need to go sit in that hard for a little bit. And tell me just a little bit more about that friendship between the two of them. Did you have so much fun writing about that?
Oh, so I loved writing about Billy. Billy was so much fun. And she's someone I've had a number of people say she was their favorite. And because she is this like, she's got high heels and tight skirts and she's lipstick, but she's got this depth to her and a fire about her. And
Mhm. Yeah,
um, yeah, I love the Billy and Cora dynamic. And I think there's a chapter at some point where Cora is kind of processing through what is love. And I think just kind of she thinks about it through this friendship she has with Billy.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah. Well,
she's
because
one of those I feel like is a real person out there somewhere, you know?
oh yeah, yeah. No, I think she is, and one of the things is when you first meet her, at times you can kind of go, oh wow, well, she's just yeah, she. You can make a snap judgment about what you think she is, but then you get to know her and you go, oh, there's so much more depth. And I think there's quite a few people out there that on the surface you may snap to a decision about what you think they're like, and that you just think maybe they're a little bit more surface, but then
Yeah.
no, there's way more to that. And well, with this whole book, you were able to, at the end, you talked about you were able to kind of combine your passions with the foster care and adoption system and the beginning of World War II. Because I think most historical fictions probably are like in the middle of it. They're not
Yeah.
in that beginning brewing section where like some of the people really had no idea what was going on in Europe. A lot of Americans had no idea at that time what was really brewing over there until much later. So you got to kind of combine these two passions in this book. And one of the things that I always like to ask is what would you say to encourage someone to follow the passion that God has placed in their heart? Because they may not have a passion for adoption, but they may be given a passion to help out some other. But we sometimes need a little bit of encouragement to follow that.
Yeah. Oh man, so many things. I think one is just kind of having this abundance mindset of if God is calling you to this, you don't have to strive to make it all happen. You don't have to know, like it's not all in your ability. It's kind of just this, I mean, open-handed, like, okay, Lord, like make the time for it, make the connections happen.
Mhm.
Like, Lord, make this happen. So I think I think when we start to have this scarcity, like, how am I going to have the time? How can I do this and have kids? How can I have a job? Like, um, it just puts it all on us. And so I think that would be my encouragement.
Okay, very good. Well, I am going to receive that
Okay.
because I can relate to that. I was like, oh, Lord, okay. Now I know why you just told her to say that.
Aw.
So thank you very much. Callie, if somebody is interested in this book or connecting with you on some other things, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I would say calliemurray.com. And I've got a Substack there linked out. There's an Instagram. I'll just be sharing some stories on there. So calliemurray.com. And then the book is The Brunswick.
Very good. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed the book, and and I just cruised right on through it, partially because I needed to, but also because I wanted to, and it was really fun to read through some different time periods that I wasn't used to, and really enjoyed a lot of the things that you tackled in that book. So, thank you for tackling that and writing a beautiful story, and thanks for spending some time with us today.
Thank you so much.